And we are live. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you are probably already aware, you are here to learn about stress. This is the physiological effects of a life out of balance. I am Tina Curry-Logan, and my co-host is Dr. Hayley Nelson. Hello, hello.
Hello.
So we will jump right in and get this show going. This evening, we have a good amount to cover with you. What we'll cover tonight is here on the screen now. I'm not going to go over everything in detail because we want to get right into it. So we've got a lot to cover here. I'll be covering some of the early information and the endpoints, and Dr. Nelson will be covering a lot of the science-based research components. To give you a little bit of background on us, we thought we would share a little bit of personal information about us, and I will reintroduce Dr. Hayley Nelson and let her introduce herself to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for checking this out tonight and joining us. Again, my name is Dr. Hayley Nelson. A little bit about me. I have my PhD in psychological and brain sciences from Johns Hopkins University. I earned that in 2010. After finishing my degree, I moved up to the Philadelphia area. You can see me and my husband by the Love Park in downtown Philadelphia in that one picture there, where I was a faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania in their biological basis of behavior program, where I taught several classes there for that program and served as an academic advisor, as well as ran the undergraduate research program for the biological basis of behavior. Then my husband and I got our first baby, which was our dog Callie, or is our dog Callie. She's up there in the corner. It's actually quite fitting because recently she was unfortunately just diagnosed with Cushing's disease, which is actually, as a side effect or as a result of it, she has an overproduction of cortisol, which we're going to learn a lot about tonight as part of the stress response. So I had to include her here on this. She is my first baby, followed by my human children, which you see here. It's Charlie and Henry. Charlie is 5, Henry is 2, and any chance we can get to go to the beach, that's what we do. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. So that's us in January. Going to the shore. But so that's all, taking place here. What brought us up to the Philadelphia area. Currently, I am a full-time tenure track professor of psychology at Delaware County Community College. I love it there. I get to really focus on teaching and really getting to know my students, and also doing outside presentations like this in the community and town hall meetings and things like that, which is awesome. And in addition, I founded Be Well Inside and Out with Dr. Hayley Nelson, where I am able to, with my brand partner of Arbonne International, be able to help people who are seeking ways to improve their health, both inside as well as outside on their skin, through various nutrition programs and products, as well as skincare and personal care items as well. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a brain geek, and as you'll soon see, but before I delve way into the brain, I would like to turn it over to Tina Curry-Logan, who's going to introduce herself and kick off the webinar.
All right. Thank you, Hayley. A little bit about me. I am Tina Curry-Logan. I am a personal development and leadership coach. I have a degree in civil engineering from Columbia University. And because of that, I spent 10 years in the commercial construction world. I worked for a general contractor in many different capacities, and I bring that business experience and engineering mindset to everything I do. I am also a certified yoga teacher. I bring a lot of yoga philosophy into what I do now as well. And most recently, I am in the process of getting my ICF accredited coach certification from IPEC, which I will finish this summer. So tying all of those things together, my engineering mindset, yoga philosophy, coaching skills, I bring them all together in my business, which is Self-Worthy, which is where I gather all of that up and I use it to help people connect to their passion and purpose so that they can be better leaders in both their career and in their personal lives. It's very meaningful to me. It's been a passion project over the past couple of years, and within it, I get to do one-on-one coaching, group coaching, leadership development trainings, other sort of informational trainings like what we're doing here tonight. On the personal side, I am happily married to my wife, Liz. We have been together for 12 years now, and we don't have any human children yet, but we do have Gus and Olive, who you'll see here. They stand in for that at the time being. But enough about me. Let's jump right in. So let's talk about stress. First thing, we all have it. If you came here tonight and you say, I don't have any stress in my life, I'm going to say you're either not human or why are you here? So obviously we all have stress. And as Dr. Hayley Nelson will tell you a little bit later in the presentation, it's essential for our survival. But when we have those long-term, chronic, stressful kinds of scenarios, that takes a toll on our mind and body. So what we're going to do first here tonight is being able to identify our own stressors, because that helps set the roadmap for how we can mitigate those stressors. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is a little activity that is called the Wheel of Life exercise. This is something that I do with my coaching clients, and it helps paint the picture for where you stand currently. I uploaded this to the Facebook event, so if you were able to print it out, great, grab it now. If not, don't freak out. We can draw one really quickly and I will talk you through it. So grab a blank piece of paper if you have one handy. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, and just something to write with. And I will talk you through what we have here. So we'll have these categories listed on your wheel. I'll say them to you in case the screen is small and you can't see them, and we'll set it up here quickly. So let me put up this bigger version of it. And what you're going to do, if you have a piece of paper, is basically draw a circle and split it into 8. Something like this. Doesn't need to be pretty. Mine's not particularly pretty. And each of these pie pieces is going to be labeled with an area of life. And I can read those off to you. We have family and parenting, personal development, spiritual awareness, fun and enjoyment, relationships, which this wheel is split into intimate and social, but you can keep them together, health and aging, personal finance, and career and profession. And I'll read those to you one more time in case you're trying to get them all jotted down. We have family and parenting, personal development, spiritual awareness, fun and enjoyment, relationships, both intimate and social, health and aging, personal finance, and career and profession. Now, if you decide you want to change those up, or you don't like one of them, skip it or change it, whatever you'd like. It's not an exact science in this component of the presentation. So what we're going to do here is take a look at each of these components and look at how they all interrelate. You may notice that the wheel that is on the screen right now has the numbers 1 through 10 in each section. If you're able to fit that in on your personal wheel that you've drawn for yourself, go ahead and write those in. If not, it's okay to estimate. Again, this is just to give us an idea of where you stand. Okay. Give you a couple more seconds in case you're trying to make it work for you. Again, it doesn't need to be pretty. Mine is not particularly pretty. Okay. This is where we're gonna start having some fun. We're gonna do this in 2 parts. The first part, we're going to take a look at all of these components, the career, the fun, the relationships, all of it. And each one of those, I want you to, individually speaking, each section of the wheel, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate how important that area is to you. And either circle the number that corresponds to that, or if you're doing your own ad hoc wheel, you can kind of guesstimate where that number is on that section of the pie. So make a little circle for where that that falls for you. So 1 being not important at all, 10 being super important, one of the most important things that I have in my life. Okay, just take a minute, go with your first gut reaction. It has to do with where you are right now. Okay, once you've circled them, may look something like this, may look completely different. Everyone is unique when it comes to this. So once you have those circles, connect them all with a line. This wheel that I have up on the screen, you may notice, it doesn't look particularly round. A lot of times they don't. You may notice that some areas have a spike where they are more important to you, or you may have dips elsewhere. So the question we want to ask ourselves is, what do these results say about me? What is it that I can infer from the things that I am seeing on this wheel right now? And what this ties into is things that we rate as highly important to us tend to have a correlation to things that we value. So on this example wheel, family is rated as a 9. That might mean that family is a value that this person holds. Whereas you can see that social is listed as a 6, social relationships. Maybe that isn't friendships, maybe aren't as big of a value to this person. So keeping that in mind, let's move on to part 2. This is where it gets really fun. Looking at the exact same wheel, the same categories, the same scaling, 1 to 10 system here. On a scale of 1 to 10, now I want you to rank how satisfied you are in each of these areas of life. On a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 being not at all satisfied, 10 being perfectly satisfied, I couldn't be more satisfied. This time, I'm going to ask you to mark with a square so that we can tell apart the difference between the circles and the squares here, okay? So make your choices. Put a square to indicate where you fall on the satisfaction level in each of these. It may look something like this. We'll connect those with a line as well. You can see that this example wheel, things don't exactly line up. The shape is actually a little bit different too. What's that about, right? So the question we're going to ask here is, how do we interpret these gaps? On the example wheel that we have here, you can see that career is listed as a 7 in importance, but as a 4 in satisfaction. What does that mean? That could mean that you have a value in an area. You value your career, you value your career development, but that satisfaction drop there can show you that you're not living in alignment with that value. So if we bring it all together, when we look at this exercise, the main thing we want to talk about is that the rating of each area of life by importance helps us to identify our values. And it can be things that spin off from this. So career, because I rank that high on the importance level, that could mean that I have achievement as a value of mine. So we can extrapolate some information from that. And then when we rate our satisfaction in each of these levels, or in each of these areas rather, and we have that gap that is different between importance and satisfaction, and I'm saying a difference of 2 or 3 points is considered a significant difference, that means that we're not in alignment with our values, and that can be a source of stress. But it goes further than that, because we don't live our life in these neat little pie pieces, right? Everything is tied together. So there can be a lot of interplay there. To give you an example, I was working with a client who hired me to coach her in her career development. She was trying to get a promotion and wanted to work through what it would take to get her there. I had her fill out a wheel of life, and as expected, her career and her personal finance, she ranked pretty low. She was at 3s and 4s, somewhere in there. And her family, she ranked as a 10. She had a really strong relationship with her family. She's a single woman, but she has a strong relationship with her parents and her sister. She has a nephew that she watches regularly. So she has strong family bonds. Now, I could look at that wheel and say things are good there. But I asked her to interpret as a whole, looking at the big picture, what can you tell me based on what you see on your wheel of life? And she came to the conclusion that the expectations of her from her family were taking away from the time that she could be spending on her career development. She saw it as, I am over prioritizing my family when this is a time that I need to focus on myself and my career. So again, this can be something that you might find something that is an aha moment for you, or you may look at it and say, that's exactly what I expected. The point here is that everyone's wheel is unique. No one's going to have the same wheel of life in any regard. And the fact is, it's a benchmark in time. So me filling out this wheel today could look very different 6 months from now and a year from now. So this is a really great tool to help you get that snapshot of where am I now, where do I want to be, and give that measurement of how you're working to progress towards your goals. Now, I brought up that this is a way for us to identify where our stressors are coming from, why we have stress, but I'm not the PhD here, so I am now going to turn it over to Dr. Nelson, who can talk to you a bit more about the science behind the stress response.
Yes. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. Of course, the professor in me has a PowerPoint presentation all ready to go. Let me show this. All right, so now we get to talk about the brain, all the cool, awesome stuff that I love so much. Not that, I mean, I love the Wheel of Life exercise too. I've learned so much about that as well. This is just my, like, I just want to hold brains all the time. But so now we're going to talk about what it's actually doing in our body physiologically and why it's so important to identify what these stressors are so we can help mitigate a lot of the potential problems and things that you could be experiencing in your life. So the outline for what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to very, very, very briefly just introduce you to what the nervous system is, how it functions, and then talk about the neurobiology of the stress response, and then talk about some holistic options to help mitigate some of the chronic stress that you might be having and some anxiety management options. And then Tina's going to pick up where I leave off as well. So when we're talking about our nervous system, what it is, it really serves three basic functions. It is a way for us to interact with the outside world. So we receive information from the world around us through all of our senses. We process that information in our brains, right? We perceive it, we pay attention to it, we store it in our memories, we learn from, mistakes or learn positive things, anything. And then we respond, right? We act on it. So let's say there's a bee flying around, I'm seeing it, I'm hearing it, it lands on my skin, I feel it, I'm able to receive that information. And then I have to process it and say, okay, there's a bee on me. What am I going to do, right? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? And tie it into some previous memories that maybe I had. And then what am I going to do? Am I going to fly, bat it away? Am I going to run away, like screaming like a little kid? Am I going to, capture it and store it for my child to look at under the microscope? What am I going to do with it, right? That's what my brain is allowing me to do, what my nervous system allows us to do. And how our nervous system functions, it's made up of the building blocks of specialized cells known as neurons, all right? So this is a very rough estimate of what some neurons look like, but they're set up to do exactly what our entire nervous system is set up to do, to receive information, process it, and send a response out, right? So it receives information through areas known as areas known as dendrites, receives the sensory information from nearby cells. And if there's enough information, the neuron is going to actually, we call it firing, right? That's the actual scientific term. We say the neuron fires. And by firing, what it's specifically doing, it's creating and generating what's known as an action potential. And that's sent down along the axon to nearby neurons to receive that information and just start this whole process all over again. And the information that is sent It's actually chemicals, right? So we have one neuron that's sending information to another neuron, and the majority of our connections, at least for humans, what we do is we release chemicals in between these two cells, which allows us to have an infinite number of possibilities, right? Are we going to excite that other cell? Are we going to inhibit it? How is that going to change between individuals, different situations? That's how genetically identical twins can respond differently in different situations, because their cells are functioning differently. Now, these chemicals, what they actually are called, and you've probably heard this term before, they're called neurotransmitters, because that's what they do. They transmit information from one neuron to another. And we have over 100 different neurotransmitters that have been identified so far, and we're still looking for more. But here are just some of the top ones, some key ones that you might have heard about in the news or in classes in college or high school. Serotonin, which is so intricately tied to your mood, which we're going to talk a lot about today in this talk. But some of the other ones, glutamate, GABA, endorphins, the opiate system, right? Acetylcholine, my favorite, dopamine. That's what I studied. That's what I got my PhD investigating. But what I want to call your attention to is what can happen when these neurotransmitters are out of balance, right? So if you have an undersupply of serotonin, that could be linked to depression, and you can take drugs, for example, to raise your serotonin levels. If you have too much dopamine, that's linked to schizophrenia, or too little, Parkinson's disease, right? So there's this happy balance that you want to be able to maintain with these neurotransmitters. And I'm going to touch back on this again at the end of my talk, talking about how we can naturally and holistically support our neurotransmitter system, and in turn support a healthy brain. In addition to the nervous system, it's really important to also know that our hormones play a huge role in our mood and how we act. And how our hormones work, this is known as the endocrine system. And it really is this feedback system and this interplay between the nervous system and the endocrine system, because it's controlled by the brain. So the brain sends signals to this area known as the pituitary gland, which sends signals to other glands throughout the body, right? And then these glands, like your ovaries or your adrenals, are going to release hormones throughout your bloodstream that are going to circulate through your whole body and can cause effects, positive and negative effects, for you. And we're going to talk about the adrenal gland because it releases the chemical for the stress response known as cortisol, right? But before we get into that, we have to really understand what stress is. Stress is a very active term. It's a process of how we view or appraise an event that's happening to us. And we can appraise it, or we can view it as something that's either threatening or challenging, and then how we respond to it, right? That's what stress actually means. And what we're responding to are these things known as stressors. And we all have stressors in our life. We cannot control them, right? We can try, and some things we can, try to eliminate and things like that. But we're always going to have stressors in our life. But what we do have control over, at least to some extent, is how we respond to them and how we view them, and then in turn, how we react to them. And what can happen is if we view them in a negative way, and if we have negative reactions to them, and then we have an extreme case of it, or a prolonged situation where we have a lot of stress for a long period of time, this can cause significant harm to our body. So what I want you to do, and I posted this in the Facebook page, but I have it posted here, and I can share it with anybody who's interested in seeing it. I can send you an email. But this is actually from Holmes and Rehe, I believe that's how you pronounce it, this is a very valid and reliable study where they listed a bunch of possible stressors that you could be experiencing in your life, and then it gave them what's known as an impact score or a life change unit. And so marriage, for example, is considered 50 life change units, or a death of a spouse would be 100 life change units. So there's really big things like that, but then there's also small things like a minor violation of the law that's only 11 has an impact score of only 11. But what you should do, and what I encourage you to do, maybe not right now or whenever you have the time, is to go through this list. And what I want you to do is think about over the past 12 months, or in the past year, how many of these things you've encountered in your life. And then you have to add them up. Now, if you've had 3 jail terms, then you would have to multiply 63 times 3. Or if you've had 10 parking violations, then you're going to have to, 11 times 10, right? So now you're starting to get higher numbers there. So just because you might not have had a death of a close family member doesn't mean that you don't have stressors that could be negatively impacting your life, because they all add up, they compound. And what researchers found is once you add up those numbers, if you have a score of 150 or more, you have a 50% likelihood that you're going to have some significant illness in the near future, right? I've actually never met anybody who's had less than 150 score. So most people, and if you have, above 150, you're not alone, trust me. Where, this is something that you really need to start identifying and do practices like with Tina about the wheel of life and try to identify stressors in your life that you can try to control and mitigate. And then especially if you have 300 or more life-changing units, if that's what your score is over the past year, you have an 80% likelihood that you're going to have some significant illness in the near future. So this is something just to kind of identify where you stand and where some of these stressors could possibly be impacting your life. Okay. Now, the reason why we want to do this is because once we have the stress system, once it's activated, it actually activates two different systems in your body. It activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response. You've probably heard about that. And this is essential for survival. If you have an attacker coming towards you, or if you're in a home that's on fire, trust me, you want your sympathetic nervous system to be activated, because it's going to increase oxygen to all of your muscles so that you can get the hell out of there, right? And it's going to increase your breathing rate. It's going to increase your heart rate. It's going to increase your sweat production, decrease your digestive system, because who cares if you're digesting that pizza you just ate if you need to get out of the house or get away from some serious threat, right? And so it's extremely important, essential for our survival in these emergency responses. Another thing that is activated in the stress response is what's known as the HPA axis, which stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, right? And there's three different areas, two in your brain and then one part of your endocrine system, your adrenal gland, that gets activated and is as part of this stress response that your body goes into. So just to give you an idea of the sympathetic nervous system, I mentioned, saying that if you need to get out of a burning home, but let's say, for example, you see a child running towards a body of water and they don't know how to swim. If you've ever experienced something like that, or if you're in a traffic jam and somebody slams on their brakes right in front of you, you feel your whole body tense up, you can feel your heart rate start going. That's your autonomic nervous system, specifically your sympathetic system, activating. And then as soon as you save that child, or the accident goes away and you've never gotten in a car accident, what happens is your parasympathetic division of your autonomic nervous system kicks in. And what that does, that calms you, right? That gives you that deep breath, that sigh, that relaxation. It's going to speed up your digestion, get things moving again in the right direction. It's going to, you're going to stop sweating so much. Your heart rate's going to decrease. Your breathing rate is going to decrease. Your immune system's going to start working again, right? So ideally, we need to have both for survival, but we want to focus more on that parasympathetic, activate the parasympathetic division instead of activating the sympathetic division on a day-to-day basis, right? But if we have a lot of crises that are happening to us, or a lot of stressors that are kicking in our stress response, we're going to be spending a lot of time in that sympathetic division, arousing that sympathetic system, which, as we're going to see, it has a lot of negative effects on our health. For the HPA axis, this really kicks in when we have prolonged stressors. So not necessarily in an emergency situation where we have to, the fight or flight system has to kick in. This is going to be, long-term chronic stressors. And as a result, what ends up happening, so we have our hypothalamus triggers our pituitary gland to send adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, to stimulate our adrenal glands to release the stress hormone cortisol, right? So you might not have heard of some of those other things, but it's in the news all the time, cortisol. You want to try to limit how much cortisol is released and how much you have, because that stress hormone that's released, that's really kind of the end of the signal of the stress response for the HPA axis. It goes through your whole body, right? And it is detected in your brain. There's this beautiful negative feedback system that's going to slow it down if there's too much cortisol. But what happens if you keep having lots and lots of stressors? You're going to keep producing more and more cortisol, and you're going to continue to have more and more negative effects, right? And some of these negative effects include a response on your immune system. And specifically, it's going to weaken your immune system. So you might notice in times of stress, you're more likely to have viruses attack you, right? And I had a friend who right before her wedding, she got a herpes outbreak on her mouth. And she's like, I haven't had a cold sore in years. Why, right before I have all these pictures, do I have to get a cold sore, right? And it's because your immune system was lessened because of all the stress that she was going through, right? And a wedding is a beautiful stressor to have. It's a good thing, but it's still stress, and it's still going to activate your stress response. And so it can lead to, lots of infections. It can trigger the release of prostaglandins, which can lead to inflammation in our bodies. And some of the symptoms that you might experience would be depression-like symptoms, right? As we said, it's going to weaken your immune system. And it's also going to selectively target your hippocampus, which is the area in your brain that's responsible for many things. I'm definitely simplifying this, but the hippocampus is really important for memories, right? So you might notice that your memories aren't working as well, and some of the decisions that you make might be impaired because of this, right? Because you're actually causing brain damage as a response to prolonged stress. So if you have these persistent stressors and negative emotions that can readily occur with the onset of having these prolonged stressors, some things that I know for me, when I'm going through times of stress, I definitely engage in some unhealthy behaviors, like Ben and Jerry's become my new best friends, right? I'm not eating well. I'm not sleeping well. I might be partying too much, any of those types of things. And it looks different for everybody, right? But you're engaging in these unhealthy behaviors, which doesn't serve anybody, right? In addition, you have the release of stress hormones, which we talked about, can suppress your immune system, but then also you're activating your autonomic system, where you can have headaches, high blood pressure, things like that. And another thing that we know that the persistent stressors can do is lead to heart disease, can result in heart attacks, other chronic heart conditions, and cardiac problems. So it's definitely something that we really want to try to manage in some way, right? So we can work on identifying what areas of our life are causing stress, and then we can work together to try to figure out, okay, what can we do to help alleviate some of the negative consequences to these stressors, right? So some tips that I can provide for managing these stress effects. The first thing that I would recommend doing is, first of all, once you've identified what the stressor is, how do you view it, right? This is known as stress appraisal. So as an example for this, we have the stressors in our life that we can't control. So for example, let's say at work, you've got a really tough job that was assigned to you, right? And that's a stressor. Now there's two ways that you can view this. You can look at this as like, this is a challenge. I really better, get all of my knowledge together, assemble a really great team behind me. We're going to be really efficient. And, this is a lot of work, but we're going to get through this. And you view it as a challenge. Alternatively, you can view it as a threat. And you can say, this is beyond me. Who cares? I'm just going to get fired. I'm not even going to try. This is beyond my capabilities. And you kind of give up, right? And as an end result, if our response for our nervous system is to process incoming information, right, and then have a behavioral response, if we're viewing things as a threat, we're going to see anxiety. We're going to be fearful. We're not going to be very productive. Versus the exact same stressor, if we view it as a challenge, now all of a sudden you're going to be aroused, you're going to be focused, you're going to be motivated and driven and have a better outcome, right? So all of these events that happen in our life, they go through this psychological filter, and it happens automatically. So this is something that we can kind of put a stop in at the very beginning and say, okay, how we appraise these events and these stressors that are occurring is going to significantly influence how much stress we actually experience and then how our body responds to it. So that's one key way in which we can help mitigate some of these stressors in our life. Another thing, and this is very common in our culture, is to take medications, right? So such as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as SSRIs, Prozac being the first one that was created for mental illness. But there's so many, Zoloft, Paxil, Celexa, there's so many different ones out there. So those are one of the more common ones that are prescribed for people who are suffering from anxiety. Also benzodiazepines are a very effective anxiolytic, anti-anxiety medication that works to kind of slow your whole system down. But medications aren't for everybody, right? While they might be effective, there are definitely side effects. It's not ideal to be on these for a very long period of time. They are effective for many people, but they're not necessarily the best line of defense that you might want to utilize. So other people turn to more holistic approaches, right? So getting around a bunch of friends, having the social support, networking with other people who are like-minded, you know, having more social interactions with people has scientifically shown to actually increase and improve your overall health. Breathing routines and meditation. I mean, coming from the yoga instructor, I'm sure Tina will be able to attest to this. And there is scientific literature supporting that, you know, having this time to yourself and practicing deep breathing and cleansing breaths and things like that, as well as meditation, has significantly shown to improve people's health, specifically around anxiety reduction. Another key one is aerobic exercise. Now, I want to show you this slide here, which is highlighting a research experiment that was looking at women with depression, and they were categorized in 3 different groups. So there were women who, and they all had higher, you know, relatively high depression scores, where there was a no treatment group. So over a 10-week time period, they showed no improvement in their depression scores. Now there was a group of women who had relaxation, right? They did relaxation techniques such as meditation and calm, like slow yoga. I don't know the proper terms. I'm not a yogi, but with the kinds where you're just doing a lot of stretching and breathing and relaxation, not the ones that you're sweating and, you know, sore the next day. That's the kind that I stay away from. But that would be, you can see here that there was a significant decrease in their depression scores. But the group that I really want to call your attention to are these aerobic exercise groups. So for 10 weeks, they spent 30 minutes a day engaging in aerobic exercise. Now, I'm not talking about weightlifting or any of that, those kinds of things. Like you could do swimming, going for a nice walk, a jog, anything that's going to increase your heart rate. And what it does is it causes your system to be aroused, right? It's going to increase arousal. And in turn, it's going to counteract depression, because what it's doing to your body in a natural way is basically the same thing that these prescription medications do chemically. So this is a fantastic way that you can help kind of mitigate some of these stressors in your life, or at least the stress response and some of the negative consequences that it can have. So that's aerobic exercise. Another fantastic way that you can mitigate some of these effects would be through diet and nutrition. And this is something that with my business would be well with Dr. Hayley Nelson, tied with my brand partner with Arbonne, is something that I really love working with people on, to identify potential food sources that could be cause of triggers for inflammation and things like that, and be able to come up with healthier alternatives for you. So when you're thinking about why nutrition is so important, first of all, you need to maintain a proper ion concentration so your neurons can actually function. You need a proper balance of salts and sugars and everything like that, just for your cells to function properly. But another thing, those neurotransmitters, that communication signal between the 2 cells to allow our brains to function and do what they're supposed to do, they come from, the precursors to them come from the foods that we eat, right? So you can't, if you're starving yourself, you're not getting those precursors, and you're going to have a depletion of some of these neurotransmitters. One that I want to call your attention to is serotonin, right? I told you that this was important for your mood regulation. And as we're going to see, it's involved in the stress response. But the precursor to serotonin is tryptophan. It's an essential amino acid you get from things like beets and spinach, eggs, coconuts. These are some really healthy foods that you can start incorporating into your diet to naturally increase the amount of serotonin that you have. Again, I love working with clients on this. I help people identify with this 30-day healthy living group that I can help coach, and we eliminate potential allergens from your diet, and you slowly start reintroducing foods. And for the first time, many people feel and experience how their bodies and their mind are supposed to function, simply by changing their diet and also increasing exercise if you're able. Now, if serotonin is so important, right? So we have this tryptophan as the precursor. Well, what can happen is stress comes into our life, right? And what it can do is it alters serotonin, right? So serotonin is in there, and that's what 5-HT stands for. I know this is very scientific here. I'm trying to put the abbreviations, or at least terms that you might have seen before. But the stress response itself can limit and alter the functioning of serotonin itself. We also know that the stress response is going to be activated, and you're going to have an increased secretion and production of cortisol, which I mentioned before has a lot of negative effects just in and of itself. One thing that it does is it interacts with some pathogens and bacteria that are in our gut, and as a result can lead to severe inflammation, right? You do not want inflammation in your body. right? You want to try to follow an anti-inflammatory diet to be able to eliminate some of these potential triggers, because what inflammation can end up doing is weaken your immune system as well, which we can see here. So some of these inflammatory signals trigger the liver to secrete certain enzymes that can lead to immune suppression and reduce tryptophan even further, which means you're going to have even less serotonin. So here's the stress coming in. This is how stress can actually, so these outside influences, even if you're eating well, these outside influences can lower the amount of tryptophan that you have to be able to produce more serotonin. Now, one simple way that you can actually help your body do this and fight this is by attacking these gut bacteria, these gut pathogens, by introducing healthy probiotics into your diet. And what these probiotics do is they stop that inflammatory signal by introducing and counteracting some of those nasty gut bacteria that you might be having to reduce the inflammation, which in turn reduces the suppression of the immune system and counteracts the negative effects on tryptophan, and thereby increasing the amount of serotonin you have simply by taking good quality probiotics. Now, not all probiotics will do this for you. There are certain strains that are better than others. Some strains can't really withstand the high acidity in your stomach. So I love the one that I use. I'm happy to make recommendations for people if you'd like. But they're definitely, you can see significant, not only with the scientific literature, but simply by introducing certain probiotics into your day-to-day life, you can see the reduced inflammation and the improving of your health significantly just by doing that one simple thing. So another final thing that I want to introduce is just reducing toxins in your life. So stop smoking, personal care items. A lot of people don't realize how many toxic chemicals are in these day-to-day products that we put on our skin, and our skin absorbs everything that you put on it within 26 seconds. It gets into your bloodstream and it can fuel this the system. And some key, there's hundreds of thousands even of toxins that you want to try to avoid, but some of the key ones you want to look for, read the back of your label of products. Parabens, phthalates, you're never going to see the word phthalate, but if you see the word fragrance, especially artificial fragrances, you definitely want to try to avoid that. Sodium lauryl sulfate, toluene, anything that's petroleum based like mineral oils, they really can wreak havoc on your body and also your mind health as well. And of course I have recommendations for that as well, with my brand partner as well with Arbonne. But again, these are just some key things that you might want to try to, simple things that you can do to try to lessen the effects of stress that you have on your life. And now I would like Tina to take over and talk more about some other ways that we can reduce stress in our life. So thank you.
Okay, let me swap back over here real quick. Yes, holistic stress relief. So Hayley talked about a few of these, but what we're talking about here on a big picture is mindfulness and awareness techniques, stress appraisal, healthy habits, and connection. So Hayley talked a bit about stress appraisal, that challenge versus threat, and healthy habits here just before we switched over. So lots of different things that you can do that are not medication related, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about mindfulness. This is where it all starts. Awareness is the key, and that is why at the beginning of this presentation, we did that wheel of life, because we needed to get a sense of where do I stand? Where are the stressors in my life? Where is it coming from? And that is what allows us to then move forward with that awareness, that mindfulness, and be able to take the steps that we need to take to mitigate the stress response. And there are ways that we can actually increase our mindfulness in our day-to-day. Things like meditation and yoga practice. They've done studies that people's brain change when they practice meditation regularly. You become more mindful in all aspects of life just by doing this practice. Meditation is not for everyone. Yoga is not for everyone. I like to tell people that you can be meditative in a lot of different ways. If you're a runner, if you like to get on the elliptical at the gym, those are things you can do and be in a meditative state of having breath and body awareness for that time when you're in that activity that can still really give you those effects in a different way. More like active meditation is what I like to call it. Another thing you can do that I really enjoy doing is journaling. This is a way for me personally that I use to get all of those thoughts out of my head. You know, a lot of times, women especially, we just let everything just churn around in our heads and we're thinking 500 different thoughts at the same time. A lot of times if we take that time to just put it on paper, me personally, I've had a lot of times where I will write down something that I haven't completely been conscious of the thought just yet. I haven't completely formulated that thought, and giving myself that avenue to let those things go can help clear that space to have that awareness. One other thing is connection. And when we're talking about connection, we're talking about a few different things. We're talking about social connection, getting out, networking, meeting new people. We're also talking about strengthening your personal relationships, your friends, your loved ones, your family, you know, your spouse or your partner. These are things that you can connect with that person as well. Laughter and fun. I love this one because on that wheel of life, there is a fun and enjoyment section. And we as Americans, especially, totally undervalue fun and enjoyment in our lives. And I think Dr. Nelson could attest to this, that laughter can give you some of those endorphins that really help to reduce stress over the long haul. And so that is really important here as well. And the last part that I like to add on is connecting in nature and getting outside. Other studies have been done to show that doing a workout outside actually compounds the effects of, you know, the response that you get, and actually helps you to lower your stress even more. And with that, I like to talk about combining these things for what I like to call maximum strength stress relief. When we combine some of these components all together, we can really maximize the effects of the stressor being reduced, or the stress response being reduced rather. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. The first one is going for a hike with a friend. There are a couple of different components in here. We've got exercise, we've got nature, and we've got social connection. So you've got three things there, all in one activity, that can all be things that help to alleviate the stress response. One more example is a personal example, is dance lessons with your spouse or partner. I just recently started doing dance lessons with my wife. The reason why we started dance lessons is for another day. It probably caused more stress at the beginning of why we decided to do this. But we signed up for dance lessons, and in the few weeks that we've been doing it, I have seen so many benefits that I never would have expected before I signed up. Let's look at those. We've got exercise. I am moving more than I expected I would. I thought this was going to be some leisurely activity, but I break a sweat for sure. We are strengthening our relationship because we have to work together. This is a pair kind of setup. It's not like we're each doing our own thing. We have to actually work as a team, which helps to strengthen our bond. We have so much fun. We laugh a lot. We are able to be really silly with each other, which helps, but we do have a lot of fun when we're there. And a bonus one for me is that I'm learning something new. Back with the wheel of life, I mentioned that some of those things that are on the wheel can extrapolate to things that are values of yours. One of my personal values is love of learning. I go nuts for it. I feel in the zone when I'm learning something new. I get super excited and lit up by it. And this is one of those areas where that happens to me. So in one simple activity, taking a dance lesson with my wife, I'm hitting on 4 different things that are helping to reduce my stress response. So we can take these things as a whole, we can take it as pieces, but it's really the fact that this is a holistic approach, and you can have a lot of effect by combining these different things. So with that, we are going to open it for questions. If anyone has any questions for us, you can feel free to unmute yourself and we'd be happy to address anything you'd like to ask.
And please also stay in touch with us as well. Yeah, we are open. We love doing these kinds of things. And if you have a need with, anybody might want us to do a little presentation or parts of this, just let us know. We'd love to be able to help you in whatever capacity we can.
Yeah, we definitely had a lot of fun preparing for this, and hope that you got as much out of it as we got out of putting it together for you. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
What sort of like self-help products or different food items could you guys recommend that would help sort of reduce stress?
Oh gosh, there's so many out there. Definitely introducing the probiotics. And again, I would encourage you not to just go out and buy whatever probiotics on sale at Walgreens or something like that, because a lot of times you're just going to be throwing your money away. They're not actually getting absorbed into your gut. And they're not, it depends on what it is that you're looking for. Some of them might be good if you just have constipation or something like that. But specifically for stress, you want to get something that's going to colonize in your gut. The strain that I love is Bacillus coagulans, with Arbonne, we have a product known as Digestion Plus that has that strain, as well as prebiotics and other digestive enzymes to really aid in the absorption of it. And it has been shown to significantly decrease that inflammatory response and help with so many different things, is including the stress response. So definitely that, but a lot of times you might need to just figure out potential triggers in your environment, foods that you're eating. So I usually encourage people to try an elimination diet for 30 days. I know it sounds horrible because it seems like you're not eating anything that you want, but trust me, you're going to feel amazing at the end of the 30 days, because then what you end up doing is you slowly start reintroducing foods one at a time, and you can really see how your body's responding to them. So you might not realize that you have a dairy sensitivity, for example, until it's been out of your system for 30 days, and then you slowly start reintroducing it. So those would be additional things that, even though they might not directly be linked with stress, they're causing a burden on your immune system or on the inflammatory response in general. And as we saw, just inflammation in general can decrease the amount of tryptophan that you're able to make to be able to get converted over into serotonin. So if specifically looking at diet, those would be my first recommendation. But of course, I love working with people one-on-one to find out and figure out what's going to be the best solution for each individual person.
Thank you. And I've just got one more question. And by the way, you guys did an excellent job presenting everything. This was a really great webinar.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. And I'm excited to write about it. But how did you guys get into wellness? What inspired you to explore it more?
Do you want to go first, Tina?
I have always been really into all wellness topics. I just mentioned that I have a love of learning. The first time I met Hayley, I was fascinated by what she does, because those are things that I will say I've studied, because I have read a lot of literature on these different types of topics, and I find them fascinating. So when we had the opportunity to work together, I jumped on it. But in general, that's kind of how it's always been for me. That's how I got into yoga and learning about the meditation techniques and the philosophy behind the physical practice. It's always been more of I have an experience and then unfolding it and seeing what else is there. So for me, it's been simply curiosity more than anything, and it's become a passion of mine. What about you, Hayley?
The complete opposite. my wellness journey was not something that I ever thought this is not something I ever thought I'd be doing. Teaching, yes, but being like a proponent of healthy living, absolutely not. I was not leading a very healthy lifestyle, and I had a lot of negative consequences on my health as a result of that. And not only for me, but also for my family. My oldest son, Charlie, who's now almost 5.5, he had a lot of allergies his first year of life, and I was nursing him. So all the foods that I was eating was getting into the breast milk and getting into him, and it was causing all of these really horrible things. He had blood in his stool. I'll spare you the details. But it was that was when I first really started noticing what I was putting in and on my body, because before that I didn't really care. It was just me. It's like, whatever, you know. But then once I realized that what I was doing was impacting my son and the rest of my family, that's when I really started taking notice. So it's really only been about 5 years that I've honestly truly cared about my health. I mean, I've always wanted to be healthy, but never having it be a true focus of mine. And it was when I did that elimination diet that I talked about, the 30 days. I eliminated foods and really changed what I was putting in my home and on my body and on my family's body, and started noticing a significant change, not only in myself, but also in my son and then my husband. And then other people started noticing and asking me about it. So then I said, why am I just keeping this information to myself? I've learned how to read labels. I've learned how to look out for certain toxins in the environment. And I just wanted to be able to share it with other people. And combining it with my passion and love for the brain, it's ironic because even though I knew that serotonin's precursor is tryptophan and it comes from your diet, I never really put two and two together. You know, you hear the saying, you are what you eat, but in Western medicine, and even getting my PhD from Johns Hopkins, it wasn't something that we ever really talked about, how we can change the release of neurotransmitters through what we're doing. It's always been about medications and things like that we can do to try to increase it. So it was really just kind of my own curiosity, again, like what Tina was saying, but with the passion of trying to improve my son's health. That was my motivation. And then also noticing that it was improving my health and my mental health specifically, that I wanted to continue doing it, and then just wanted to share it with others.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to passing this information on, because there's so many people that I know who could benefit from this, and including myself.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Valerie. And if anybody else has any questions, you can unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat bar, or you can email us after the webinar. Any of those options work. But we want to thank you so much for taking the time and coming and checking this out. And please, we look forward to hearing from you as well if you have any further questions or just want to reach out to either of us.
Yes, thank you so much. I guess if no one else has any questions, we'll let you go. I know we're a couple minutes past the hour, so want to thank you for your time, and we appreciate you being here. And again, reach out, any questions, or just say hello. We're always happy to have you.
Absolutely. And make sure you get some sleep tonight. Sleep is also very important for the stress response. Sleep and water. I forgot to mention those things. Definitely do that.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.